Welcome to all of you. So glad you came. You dropped in. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves today. I'm Patricia Bankins. I'm the owner of the Crystal Matrix. And so welcome to everyone. We've had a number of different panels on different subjects that were of interest to us, empaths and healing and predictions for the year. And this time we thought we'd discuss disclosure because it seems to be kind of up in our society right now. So I'm going to start down here. Natara, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Ayamanatara. I go by Natara. It's way easier. I'm an instructor here at Crystal Matrix. I'm a shaman. I do sound healing and psychic work and protection work. I'm sort of an earth magic sort of instructor. And I've been working with researching, doing information on ETs and angelic forces for a while now.
And?
I'm Lisa Roman. I'm an angel healer, and I teach pranayama breathwork. I've been doing it for about 35 years. I was born like this. I work with a lot of people, and actually I'm a film producer and a screenwriter and painter as well, and gardener. I seem to work with a lot of people that are from other planets. The young kids that are integrating, higher frequency kids that are really advanced in healing energies, telepathic ways, and they're also very globally aware. And then the other part of my work is working with corporations. I like to go into companies and work with law firms and studios and economists on how to shift that money into the higher good. So if let's say if East West Bank, I get a hold of somebody there, it can change a lot of the economy into shifting money into sustainable business. If you want to, hang out with me in your own company, if it needs some shifting, I can do that with just individuals in any form, because all companies are run on energy, and that's got to change now, as we know. So, and I really like to have fun doing it. I don't really have an education in any of this, which makes it very fun for everybody who does, because they just don't like me at all. But that's okay. I'll cook for them first. I've known Patricia for about 30 years. I'm very honored to be working with this group. By the way, I'm kind of like a lone ranger for a long time. So this is new for me, to be involved with a highly spiritual group. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, welcome.
So that's what I do. And I go by Lisa Roman, or Chili Rennie Roo.
Hi, I'm Lisa Frith, and I've been working with Patricia here at the Crystal Matrix as a student. I'm one of her Reiki Masters, Transcrystal therapy people, and I've always been very drawn to the ET subject. I had an experience when I was a child, and that's kind of always kept my toe in the metaphysical door, and I'm very excited to be sitting on this side of the table for the first time ever. And we'll see what happens.
Yes, we will. Okay. So I'm the reason that I'm not a panelist, so to speak, I'm kind of moderating, is that I have my own opinions about the ETs, and they're, I think we're here. So it's not even they're here, we're here. So that's where I kind of go with it. But as far as the discussion goes, then that's not very useful. So, So I'm going to just, I looked some things up. The word disclosure itself says, the synonyms here, revelation or declaration and announcement, the action of making new or secret information known. So if we wanted to bring things out into the open as far as how we relate to those things, I think I'd like to start first with personal encounters. Lisa Frith, Miss Frith here, you did say that you had a personal encounter as a child. So I'd like to know, if you've had them, obviously, what did it look like and how did it affect you? How is it affecting you now as an adult?
Right, so I was living in San Antonio, Texas. Texas has a lot of ET UFO activity. There's a lot of military bases. There's a long history going back to the Aurora, Texas, going back to when the Bush White House was there. There's all sorts of UFOs. You can see flashing messages on YouTube if you want to research all that. My personal experience, I lived in northeast San Antonio, which was right between a couple of different Air Force bases, and I was with probably about 11 years old, and with my mom in line at the Dairy Queen, and there was a giant craft over the Dairy Queen. We were in the drive-thru, and giant craft over the Dairy Queen, and I couldn't believe that everybody wasn't jumping out of their cars and looking at this thing. And it was circular. It was more like two bowls on top, almost flat on the top and bottom, but not quite. And then with this base in the middle with lights. My mom and I got out of we were in the car, and we followed this craft to this area where they were doing construction on a mall that was being built, so I could get the time frame down. And I knew the area fairly well because I used to ride my horses in the area. And I remember it stopped over the construction site, and I remember the piles of rock and lumber and that kind of stuff. And I remember the door being open. And that's the last of my organic memory. About 10 or 15 years ago, I had a regression with Barbara Lamb. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her name. She's pretty big in the regression business. She took me into a little deeper on the experience, where I remember being on the ship. I don't remember any beings on the ship, just myself, but it's interesting because I was on a chair that was sitting on a platform with almost a pole or a pipe or something behind me. And I remember that part, and then at the end I remember kind of exiting and seeing and kind of imprinting, for lack of better words, on an image. I can show you that image, just I brought it along if anybody. So I have no idea if this has any relevance to anything or not, but I keep it on my desk just in case it ever pops up on something. And interestingly enough, a couple of years ago, Patricia and I were at Contact in the Desert, and Corey Good, who's one of these people who's coming out as having experiences, was discussing an experience he had, and the picture they showed was basically that ship, and the experience he had was very similar as far as sitting with being hooked up to pipes or something like that. And anyway, so for whatever reason that resonated with me and kind of gave me a little more encouragement. Is that a good word? So that's my experience.
Great. Thank you. Can you share a little bit of how that's affected you now? Has that led you into anything? Or is that...
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally kept my foot in this store. I think I would just be as you know, an angry atheist had I not had that little window into something greater than this 3D dimension. And it's weird. Watches don't work on me. I don't know if that has anything to it, but I used to try and buy more and more expensive watches to try and get them, and then I just gave up. And now we all have them on our phones. So those would be the two main ones.
Okay. Tara, you smiled when she said watches don't work.
Oh, yeah. I have a really fascinating electromagnetic fields. I can't wear watches; they break almost immediately. And back in the day when we used cassette tapes, I would erase cassette tapes. My car previous to the one I currently have, in 4 years I replaced the alternator 6 times, and much to Pep Boy's consternation. Because I'd come in and they'd be like, no, it can't be that. We just replaced it, and they'd test it and they're like, fine, here, have another alternator. And electronics do fascinating things around me, which is great since I'm running the tech for today. We'll see how well that goes. And it has been suggested to me that a lot of it does have to do with sort of the ET stuff. I don't have any memory in this lifetime of working with that, but I have very strong past life recall about working with ETs. So that's where some of my gnosis comes from.
Can you share a little bit about your past life recall?
Yeah. I have this theory that if you go outside at night and you look up in the sky, if the first constellation you see is always the same one, that is likely where your heritage or your lineage is from.
Okay.
And I always pick up on Orion's belts. And anyway, anytime that I'm working with someone or talking to someone who identifies strongly with Pleiadian stuff, we both seem to have a reaction on the unpleasant end of things. And I have some recall about working with them as sort of a visiting dignitary, for lack of a better term, and not being terribly impressed with them. So, and I have really strong recall from, I was teaching young royals, and folks from a different planet came in and shot me in the throat because they didn't like what it was that I was teaching. There was sort of a power struggle going on, so that came up. In channeling, I work with a group of never incarnated in human form, definitely from elsewhere, that I just call the council. They're crystalline beings that it's a grouping, and they morph between 7 and 14 energies.
Okay.
Every time anything comes up where people are like, talking about things, I start to get more flooding of memories. So today should be really fascinating. And a lot of my research that I've done was simply based on the idea that angelic forces, deities, and ETs are all the same. They all have better technology than we do, and we label them whatever works in our belief system. But that's basically what it is.
Lisa, Rowan,
Oh,
anything you want to share?
yeah, I do actually. When I was talking to angels, I didn't really care for religious things because I don't like being told what to do, and I don't think anybody should. And so when people started talking to me, I was a set decorator on film, and I would see things all the time, and then be able to hear. They'd say, Lisa, why don't you ask so-and-so about his leg? It needs assistance. And it'd be a grip on the set, and I'd say, hey, what happened to your leg? And they'd say, oh yeah, I have a pin in it. And then I'd hear somebody say, the pin needs to be taken out, it's not adjusted properly, and he needs to do it within 1 week. So I get specific information on what to do, how to do, and it's and it would be like a director one night, I can't mention his name, and I had to work a night shoot, and I didn't want to be there, and I was not wanting to be on that movie. And I'm sitting next to the director, and I heard somebody say, John has cancer, you should tell him he's going to be okay. And that was big, to deal with that kind of knowledge or information, and I'm like, no. And they said, yes. And so I said, how long have you been sick for? And the guy goes, who told you that? And then it was like a download of many different voices saying, tell him he'll be okay. And it was like, the voice is like almost like a ticker tape, tick, 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 tick. And it was information on what he should be doing to heal his leg. And while we were talking, he was just chatting with him and telling him the stuff, and he goes, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm getting really, really hot, and my leg is getting hot. And of course I'm like, can I touch it? Will I get a harassment suit? So we ended up like half hour in his trailer, and we did some healing work, and then a week later he goes, all the information you gave me I'm doing. So he no longer has cancer. He had prostate cancer. And then I found out at the end of the movie, his doctors told him he had like 4 months to live. So then I got really interested in listening to whoever was talking to me. I'm like, all right, let's do some work. So when I do the pranayama breath work with people, and that's another thing, I didn't hate meditating. So I learned this meditation, the circular breathing, and it lifts blocked areas. Cellular memory is from millions of lifetimes and more. And so if you had a trauma in another time, it's still in your memory. And we don't want to carry all that data because our brains will be like crazy. So what happens is when data is coming up to clean out, just like when you clean a computer and you get rid of files that aren't necessary, so that's what's happening is data comes up within the cellular memory, and if I'm doing the breath work with somebody, then they turn into a holograph. And I'm like, all right, I can do that, that's fun. So when the holograph resonates in a certain pulse, then the person itself, I'll see a pulse that is resonating not at the frequency of the colors. And if it's a lower energy, a sonar will go off. And then a light beam comes in, or several, that are always different. Some have been on the planet, some are healers from other times, and I'll see them in holograph, and then they'll explain what to do. And then if it's the light workers, 11th dimension and up, they work hard. And there'll be little blue light beams, and some of them were a very pale green. And recently I worked on somebody that we all know that had a light worker working on her, and it was very beautiful blue light beam with 3 hearts. And I was like, oh wow, what do you do? And he said, duh, it teaches love, right? And I was like, oh, duh. Okay, so what that light beam was doing is exuding the frequency of the heartbeat, and I saw the heartbeats in this little person's body went like a hummingbird. And then it would slow down. I watched energy going into the person, and then that person would exchange, and it's like in movies, you know, when you see Frankenstein things, so the energy exchange, right? So that's been working with people who have heart conditions, cholesterol, cysts, tumors. I've had HIV people go into remission because they're working with some pretty high frequency things going on. Back to no electronics. I haven't had any electronics in my house for about, I would say, my whole life. I gave up TV when I was 18, and watches, beepers, no microwaves, and that's part of the frequency that's bringing everybody down is too many electronics, and that's out in Japan. Japan's designing computers for high frequency beings. They have been for a long time, and the military knows this. Part of why it's not being discussed properly is because it's a mistake. And when you have a big business saying that we have done a mistake that's messing with people's brain cells so that you can't go to a higher frequency, you're in trouble. It's like a recall on a car. If Ford puts out a car that has a defective back tire, and that tire is going to go blank and have a flat, people are going to get hurt, it costs less to pay the insurance or whatever. So when corporate is involved with anything having to do with poor health, cancer is a business, shouldn't exist. There's cures for cancer in the Amazon, ayahuasca, all the shaman know this. So part of the shift is, yes, people who know this better start talking about it and writing about it and making movies about it and doing books about it and being more vocal. And this is time because I don't know the technical shift, you'd have to ask Richard about that, the planets, but this planet is, it's a little worrisome right now.
Now, Lisa, have you had encounters as a child, though, or your father did?
Well, my father is like you. Encounters, I guess. My dad is Arturian. So, and my family in New Mexico, they had sightings, you know, going to their house as a kid.
Okay.
And we'd just sit around. It was like talking about baseball. Well, we don't like baseball. But we'd talk about it like, oh, did you like those tamales? And it would be my Auntie Lisa going, oh yeah, you know those flying saucers that were out near the stable, do you want to see? So in certain pockets, and there's copper mine, my father worked in the copper mine and my grandfather in the silver mine. So a lot of the frequency of the colloidal minerals, that's what attracts. And a lot of empaths and people who are telepathic have high frequency minerals. And like the kids that I'm working with,
Right.
super high frequency. So I immediately talk to the parents to get them on more colloidals, so that they can feed that energy, you know, because we're low on sulfur and copper and zinc, and that's how we communicate our frequency. And it also helps keep the body clear of virus and bacteria. So the way we were designed, you know, the Egyptians lived a couple hundred years old. The way we were actually designed is to live a very long time, right? But ever since Social Security got sold, we can't. So there's all these business things in relation to actual common sense. You know, common sense of the planets. You know, they taught this in school, and then they cut off the knowledge of science and molecular energy because people get it, and they get it fast.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah, that's a lot of
plugged
share.
into my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I think, Natara, you mentioned the angels and the aliens, you know, that there's, to you, there's not really a great difference between those two. And do you think it's important that we understand that, or how would you explain that?
I do. Well, so first of all, I come to that from the point of view that when you look at the various pantheons that we've had around the world, the ancients and stuff like that, it's actually fairly easy if you step out of preconceived notion to see that they were what we consider to be ETs. The Sumerian pantheon is very much the Pleiadians. The Egyptians are much more sort of Sirius, Orion. You know, and if you're looking at like the myth of Atlantis, you know, those were folks who essentially had better technology than we do, that came in and had a disagreement with
discordance.
yes, with another group, and that's what dropped the vibration down, and that's what dropped our genetic pattern down, and that's what created that illusion of separation on this planet. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to understand that angels, aliens, and gods are really sort of the same package. Because once we can understand that, we can get out of this idea of disempowerment. I think that the biggest disservice we have is that we all feel disempowered. And when we can remember that, you know, we have some of this genetic makeup, we have access to a lot more power than we allow ourselves. And, you know, that's kind of my keynote is community and empowerment. And so I come at it from that point of view. And I do think it's important that we connect to that energy so that we can start to create shift and so that we can stop pretending that we're victims.
I'd like to open it, not necessarily for questions from the audience, but just, I'm curious, show of hands, how many of you feel as if the aliens or the angels came down to help out, that you'd be saved? Ooh, what
Cool.
a good group.
Nice.
Nice group. Yeah, because what Natara is saying, I mean, that's been, I think, always my objection with either of those elements, whether it's angelic or whether it was the aliens, is that, you know, I don't need to be saved. I'm empowered within myself. So I think that's what you're talking about too. And so I think that's part of my disagreement with some of the things about disclosure, is that it's, you know, it's like it's a lead-in, or it's a teaser, like, oh, we're going to give you disclosure from the government so that we'll finally, you know, you'll finally be saved, and it puts us back into that disempowered stage, as opposed to you already have all the power you want. So I think that's...
We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Yes, we are. We really are. Oh gosh, that's bad. No. Okay. Good, bad, or indifferent, that I think really that is where it is. I've had an interesting week this week. I encountered someone that had been, much like Corey Good, had been manipulated by the Dark Cabal. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about the what we call the Orion Crusaders. I think that's the term that's being used. They're the Draconians. And can we talk about implants and removal of implants? Do you think they're real? Do you think that if they are real, do they affect us? To what degree do they affect us? How do we recognize an implant? If it's there, you want to go?
I don't know how to recognize implants in other people, but I know if someone would ask me on the street, do you have an implant, I would immediately go, bam, you know, I definitely heard it from enough people that I have implants. Yeah, hopefully they're cleared by now, or they're in the clearing process.
Okay, what type of implants and where are they? Like physically?
I think that there's so many people who have different ones all over their bodies, that they'll show up, they've had them removed, they've had during surgery, and I think, I'm forgetting the doctor who was doing all the implant removals. but they would go in and they would find them on film, and when they'd go in to remove them, it would have moved a little bit and kind of escaped. And so I think there's different kinds of implants. I think some of the implants are probably stuff. I think a lot of the stuff that gets blamed on abductions, all that, is done by us, by
our government, right?
Yeah. You know, whether it's a tracking thing or a terror thing, I don't know. But so I think there's a lot of those kind of things. I think in my case, I feel that for whatever reason, I'm supposed to unfold at a certain time, and that may be holding pattern a little bit. I'm not tapped in the way they are, and I'm not saying I don't have those abilities. I'm just not.
They've been blocked.
Yeah. So not that I'm not fabulous, but I'm not that kind of fabulous yet. But I mean, I've had different experiences as far as, going back to what you'd say, as far as being saved. I'm not looking for anyone to come save us, but I think we could use a little help and a little guidance and a little. I think we have a lot of cards stacked against us that's not keeping us down, but there's a lot of truth to our history that we in this community, yes, we're probably privy to most of it, but I think everybody out walking the streets, they're not aware that there's cures for cancer, probably. They're not aware that there's free energy, probably. They're not aware that our government might lie to us about certain things that they use to herd us into doing what they want, and it's a sad thing. I think being a human is a magical gift. I mean, and I also think we're all Heinz 57s. I think I've probably got Syrian roots. I've got Pleiadian roots, I'm pretty sure. We have this amazing ability to be creative in art, to have these emotional wild rides that I think may be lost in other civilizations, cultures, and so I think there's a lot that we're envied for, and we're down here in the mud, figuring it out, thrashing it out, and we're here on this planet at this amazing time. I have a feeling there was a heck of a waiting list to get into this club, and we made the cut. And what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with this one mortal existence? Not that we're not infinite beings outside of this meat suit, but yeah, we're here to shift this planet, and I don't think it's too late. I think we still can. I know a lot of people think it's too late, but I think magical things are happening, and I think so much is combining to make that happen. Where we are, physically in the galaxy, as we're moving into a higher vibrational aspect of the galaxy. We're moving into this 26,000-year cycle that repeats itself, and here we are. So, I mean, we're right here on the brink of it, and it's so exciting. It's so exciting.
Good times. Natara, you want to talk about implants?
One of the things that Lisa said jumped out at me, and yes, I will talk about implants. There are things that are less esoteric than cures for cancer and free energy that are buried in our history that we don't learn about. Things that are super current. I mean, you want to talk about the bombing of Tulsa of the Black Wall Street in the 1920s, I want to say.
28.
Sorry?
I think
1928. There's whole swaths of history from our country in the last 100 years that people don't learn about. And if that's the case, and there are people who were alive during this that can tell us about it, it shouldn't be surprising to anybody that there are things that would empower us more that are hidden from us. Implants. Sorry, tangent, but
Disclosure.
Right. So, implants. I do believe that there are physical implants. I tend to pick up on sort of the energy signature of them.
Okay.
And I
Could you talk about it?
Yeah. Sometimes I think that the energy signature that I'm picking up is correlated to a physical thing in the body, and sometimes I think it's an energetic implant. And sometimes they will look like little flat pieces of metal with edges, the corners, that remind me of hematite chips, but thinner and a very different metal.
They look like the plug on that goes into my iPhone.
Yeah, kind of. Okay. Yeah. Kind of like a micro USB. Yeah. And the energetic ones, I tend to get much more. This may freak you out. I'm sorry, because that's a very strong image for me. But baby aliens from the Aliens movies, there's a weird fossil thing that we have from like I don't remember what year, but they're all sort of these weird insects, almost like somewhere in between an insect and a
Octopus.
shellfish.
Yeah.
That hook in and latch, and they tend to have like a stinger, and they will hook in. I especially tend to see them on people's spines and stuff like that. And I find that doing the sound therapy that I get from the council works really well at releasing those. And Reiki can help, and crystals are especially good for that kind of stuff. And I think that when I'm seeing one that's correlated to a physical thing in the body, that what I end up being guided to do deactivates it, and there's a certain amount of, I think, it starts to pull to the surface, but I have yet to physically remove one.
Okay.
But I see them here a lot. I do get them back here on some people. Jawline seems to be a place where I see them a lot. Frequently, like on the back or on the places that we don't do a lot of stuff with. And yeah, they totally move. There's like some nanotechnology there that's fascinating. There's a little, it's alive in some way. It'll shift. It'll shift.
Lisa Roman, do you have a
Question? Can I have a question?
Oh, I'm going to hold questions until the end if I could. Thank you. Lisa, implants.
Yeah, I've seen a few, and some, they look like when you take apart a toy, that little piece, that little green piece in the back that has the little electronic things, but they're metal, and they taste, and I know when a client has an implant because I can taste the metal, and the actual person, when I see them, they tend to, the implants of negative communication the person seems to lack humanity and compassion. There's something in their eyes that they're kind of checked out. There's a little checkout because they're channeling another unhuman. Like the light beams are here to help. You know they're here to help because they do it. And they show us, we're here to help, we're going to show you how to do it for yourself.
And they have that compassion.
It's a compassion, and you feel this utter, and they're not going to save us, and that's what they're showing us. We're going to show you how to work on yourself. And we can show you in a light second, right? Where the implants, I've seen a lot on a lot of young women. And back to the cell phones, there was a census taken a while back because the cell phones are getting smaller and smaller. And when they did this survey on would you like to have your cell phone implanted in your head, huge percentage said, yeah, that's wrong, that's bad, because that gets people ready. So if there's a chip in your head or born identity, oh, I want one, tracking device. People have given up their identity and their privacy, and anything inserted can cause problems. The military does it all the time. All the time. Special forces, they put a chip in their heads and they don't remember their family when they come home. They don't remember experiences. Clients that I've seen have, women have them here. I've had to help people remove some implants in their sexual areas, you know, that have pretty much like made some agreement to sell an ovary or something. So those implants look, they're like scorpions, yeah, they'll clamp, and the stinger. And the way we work it out is first you've got to see it, and then the person has to be in agreement. Because some people are like, I said, are you ready? And it's always the same, are you ready to remove any and all negative energies that are not serving the higher good? And that encompasses a lot, right? And then we work it out. It's almost like you see the color, and then it'll start to break down. The color of the metal will stay metal, silver, pewter color, and it'll start to break down until it looks like Fuller's Earth. And then we transmute it out. Like the hand goes into a magnet, and then you don't even have to touch the person. And then you lift the magnet, and that energy comes out. So it is breakable. You can break it down, but it takes a lot of laser frequency. And that's the light workers. The light workers are coming to assist us in learning how to do that on our own. I like them, and they are angelic.
I like them, that's
I
cute.
like them a lot. They're nice and warm and fuzzy.
They are. Alice and Co. up in Portland, Oregon, just threw this in. There was something called the event that was designated to happen the end of the middle of end of March. We follow Alice and Co. And she's a hypnotherapist, and her clients were, she was talking to them under hypnosis. They were all talking about the same event, basically the same instances of the event that were going to happen. And I wondered if, I know that you know about Alice and Co., obviously, but I wondered if anyone else on the panel has heard about Alice and Co. or about the event and it coming about, or it happening, and the change or the shift electromagnetically on the planet. Oh, that.
I have no idea who Alice and Co. is.
But, you know, the event.
Yeah, I've only been writing about the shift for what, like
I know.
10, 12 years.
15 to something years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're being given the opportunity, or we're giving ourselves the opportunity, really,
Yes.
to shift our energies, to step into more of who we really are. You know, we're all multidimensional beings, and just because our focus is here in this space, it doesn't mean that we're not existing on other levels as well. You know, every piece of information, every event, everything always has multiple levels of information. And we've been given, you know, over the last 10, 15 years, a number of opportunities to step into a higher version of ourselves. And we keep just missing it. You know, I mean, I think a lot of us, you know, probably a bunch of us there in the room, you know, have gotten bits of it and we've stepped up the ladder a bit.
Right.
But we haven't taken that giant step up to the next thing yet. You know, some people call it a dimensional frequency. But it's really coming into ourselves, having a better understanding of our multidimensional selves, accessing our power better. And every time that there's a giant event, you know, and I would call 9/11 a giant event, we've had the opportunity to shift. And we see bits of that whenever there's a massive catastrophe. People come together, people come into community, and we start to move into that space, and then something happens. Usually like everybody being re-traumatized by the media or something like that, and we don't fully complete that shift.
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt that one simply because I think what happens is that we become distracted. There was something by the media or by the dark cabal or by the government, whoever it is that we want to tag it as, whoever, you know, they are. But the distraction is thrown out so that when our attention is into that humanity and into going into being helpful or being compassionate or being into the space of raising or elevating the energy around us and around the community on the planet, a distraction is thrown out there that is, you know, it's like that sparkly thing, and we all go whoop, and we jump into that distraction, and that distraction takes us away from the purpose that this action was presented to us for.
It's spiritual swirling.
Squirrel. Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely. And you know, if you look at recent history, you know, over the last 100 years, there was a big upsurge in awareness which is the first step in shifting, in the late 1800s. There was a big step in awareness in the late 20s. You know, and I think you guys all know what the distraction was on that one. You know, and we've had these big upsurges in awareness. We had another one like in the late 60s, you know, and then we got Vietnam. Thanks so much. You know, and we've been moving again towards this upsurge in awareness, and, you know, we manifest some great orange Cheeto. Sorry, I'm trying not to bring politics into this. It's hard, because it's a distraction.
But we could say distractions, if we wanted to segregate them down, we could say that they're whatever would create fear within the population, whatever would, and fear, then we could split it apart as far as how it affects me economically, how it affects me as far as my family is concerned, my safety, however it's going to affect my well-being as far as being able to just have food or, you know, be safe.
Well, and the fascinating thing is that these distractions in and of themselves are actually opportunities to complete that shift.
Correct.
And we just don't pick them up. And so, you know, my hope in doing panels like this is to get us all more aware of, oh, I can go into fear or I can go into shift, so that we can make the conscious, empowered decision, you know, to pick door number one, the positive opportunity, as opposed to I'm going to go back into fear and allow myself to be disempowered. I'm going to disempower myself, essentially.
Either of you? Lisa's?
Lisa.
No, the fear thing is pretty big. It's pretty big among people, and when, you know, all this economy thing, and no money in the governments, it's like you can print money downtown, the Federal Reserves, you know, and it puts fear. And back to awareness. Well, yeah, once a person's aware, you know, when people lose jobs, you know what they do? They open their own business. That's the plus side. When corporations close and everybody's scared, all those people go, well, I'm going to make my jewelry now. Or, wow, weren't you going to open this restaurant of your own? It allows people to have more independence.
Follow my heart.
Follow your heart. So that's the plus side of all the crap. You have to do the colon cleanse and then you feel better.
Yeah.
You know?
So, one of the things, I love that, one of the things that I scribbled as we were talking about all of this is
stars. Who knows, by the way? Who knows your little planets and stars?
You know, is the whole disempowerment thing, the whole fear thing, serves a very small group of energy holders. And I don't say this to make us feel more victimized. I say this to empower us. Going back to my Atlantean thing that I touched on at the beginning, this one group came in and they time traveled. I don't know to like seriously put on the tinfoil hat, but in this panel I guess that's okay. They time traveled because they messed up their planet so badly. They killed the atmosphere in their planet because they were not operating in all of their operating systems. I call chakras operating systems, okay? And different beings.
Integrity.
They weren't in alignment. Yeah, they were not operating on all cylinders, if you want. And because a planet is the higher self of, or one aspect of the higher self of whoever lives on it,
Okay.
when you're not operating in your integrity, you're screwing the planet. You know, and planets are awesome. They'll just kick you off and be like, I'm fine. But it does bad things to whoever lives there. Anyway, they had screwed up their atmosphere. They time traveled to here because we still had an atmosphere and we had the metals that they needed in order to be okay. And the way they chose to stay was to share bits, dribs and drabs of information with some of the small energy holders, or the small group of energy holders. And but because they weren't operating on all of their frequencies, it never quite works right. you know, and you can talk about the Martians, you can talk about the Bene Elohim, you can talk about, there's parallels through all of the mythology about what you want to call these guys, okay? I tend to go with a-holes, but whatever. But you look at, like, some of the information that Tesla was bringing through, and how it got corrupted. You look at, like, the Philadelphia experiment. How many here are familiar with the Philadelphia experiment? Okay. So there was a thing where the Navy was actually working on time and space travel. And because the heart chakra was not involved in the shifting of matter from one space to another, and this is not how most people explain it, so, but because not all of the operating systems were involved, when this
formula was off.
Yeah, when this ship rematerialized with naval guys on it, they were through the bulkhead and stuff because it didn't materialize properly, because the formula was off, because not all of the operating systems were working. And so we get all of these dribs and drabs, or the government gets all of these dribs and drabs of bits of information, and it's not in integrity. It's not working the way it's supposed to because they haven't fully engaged. And so when we get new technology information from better sources that are fully engaged, fully in their integrity, it works better. You know, we have things like, you know, electronics that work for higher vibrational beings, stuff like that. But that doesn't serve this small group of energy holders.
Correct.
And, you know, I mean, like, David Icke's been around for years, okay? And David Icke talks about this stuff, but he comes at it from a place of fear, and I find it infuriating. Because it's disempowering. He has excellent information, but he comes at it from this victim place of, they are doing this to us. And we can shift that energy of they are doing this to us to, well, how do I step past that?
But don't you think that brings us back to that space of, you know, we're waiting for the angels or the aliens, the spaceship to come and take us back to the mother lode?
Exactly.
Or are we fully self-empowered and we are doing this all together?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
because if Ike is presenting this, and that's what I agree with so many of the people that bring out this information, is that they are presenting it as a place of them and us, and we are the victims and they are the perpetrators. We've taken out the equation of being responsible. You know, where is the self-responsibility that we all hold here? Because we are all on the planet. So, yes.
I'd just like to add one thing about David Icke, because if you watch the YouTubes or if you watch the snippets, yeah, you get that aspect of it. I've spent the 10 hours in the auditorium with him, and it is one of the most empowering things that I've ever gone to.
But he's changed a lot too.
So this was just 2 years ago, or whatever. But yeah, it definitely, his message is empowering.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm really glad.
Because he does have such great information.
Yeah, he has great information, and his older information, which was mostly what I was in contact with. But I mean, you look at, you know, in studying all of the, like, angels, gods, aliens stuff, you know, I look at all of the sacred texts, you know, and like some of the Indian stuff is amazing. But, you know, even if you look at the Abrahamic stuff in Exodus, Genesis, it says, you know, it basically, in like 2 sentences says the angels, gods, whatever you want to call them, ETs, came down, married women, had children.
Right.
It's there.
It's in Chronicles, it's in Enoch, and it's in Numbers also.
Right, but I mean, you know, it's in the very beginning of the Torah. I mean, you know. And so for people to go, oh, well, you know, if I believe in Jesus, I can't believe in this stuff, it's a little confusing to me, you know, especially when you look at, like, some of the information that comes through, like, the Western Mystery School. You know, Yeshua Messiah incarnated on a different planet first, completed his entire cycle, then came through here as Enoch, or Elijah, and Enoch. And then his second lifetime here was Yeshua Messiah. You know, so I mean, even the Jesus stuff has a lot of off-world, different dimension, whatever you want to call it, energy to it. So, sorry, I'm ranting.
Okay,
Well, very well spoken.
all right. Anyone else on the panel have anything to add before I open this up to questions from the audience?
No, I mean, I guess the only thing I would add as far as what you were bringing up with keeping us all apart is just whatever labels you want to put on anything. It's all about the disharmony, the pitting us against each other. However, they have to do it again with
The big thing.
the power holders. And you know, it's too bad. Love isn't the answer. Love is the only thing that, you know, it's. We've heard it all our lives. Get it in there. I mean, you have to love your neighbors. You have to love yourself first. You know, so yeah. Disclosure, interesting times. You know, I don't know if you saw just even in the mainstream, there's so much more news about everything. The Arizona pilots, that was just in the, you know, you never would have seen that 2 or 3 years ago, and now it's like every week there's some other article, you know, whether it's with Tom Belongs to the Stars Academy or just CNN, MSNBC, whatever. The articles are out there. I think, like I said, I think these are amazing times that we're here to usher in.
Usher in, I like that. So questions out here?
I'll add to what she said about what we're seeing more and more of, like Ancient Aliens, which is a National Geographic show. They've got all the guys on now, little bits, David Wilk, I mean, all saying different things.
But you love the fact that it's National Geographic, right?
No.
I love the fact that that
It's
to me is mainstream. Yeah,
That's why I like it, yeah. It's mainstream. And a lot of people are saying that.
Yeah. You had a question.
So are implants totally different than, because I've heard, I have a recent friend I met about 1 year ago, that he said he had like an evil spirit following him, like attached to him. So implants would be different from that?
Correct. The implant is different than evil spirits.
Sometimes people interpret them the same. So,
But implants are implants, and
Sure.
there are evil spirits. I mean,
sure, yes,
let's
they're
separate
there.
that.
But sometimes people will be like, oh, you know, I have an evil spirit, or I have a slight possession, or a hitchhiker, or whatever, and it's really, I'm carrying an implant.
So in other words, it could be cross-referenced, but as a rule, there is such a thing as an implant, there is such a thing as an evil spirit.
So it could be separate.
It could be separate, but he could be interpreting it as, he could be interpreting his implant as an evil spirit, so.
Well, and also implants will create a weak spot in which, you know, you do tend to get hitchhikers, so yeah, it could be either both.
Or it could be both. And then the second part of my question, is it true, like evil spirits can attack better if it's from the back? Like, versus the front?
Sure, because you can't see him coming. No one attacks you from the front.
It's not the wise thing to do, really. Not if you want to win.
Even humans want to sneak up on you from the back. Nobody sneaks up on you from the front because you can see them. I mean, it's a point of logic. So there isn't intelligence to anything.
Well, and you're less protected than that, really.
Correct.
I mean, most
You
people
can't defend.
don't strengthen their aura in the back as much. So.
Okay, I thank all the panelists. Thank you for all showing up.
Thank
and
you.
participating. And the audience. Thank you.